Okay, hello everybody. We are going to do a very simple Lake Tahoe painting and have fun. I'm going to show you kind of how to do a wash, how to do a pine tree, and water in mountains. Okay, so because it's watercolors, we wet down the palette first with a spray bottle just to get the paints nice and workable. First thing we're going to do is wet the paper because we want to do a wash. We're going to do the sky all the way down to the lakes. And because we're starting with the lightest color, we can paint the whole thing because everything else will be darker and cover up what we've done. Okay, so we're going to start with a cerulean blue. And I really encourage people to get good quality watercolors. My favorite are Winsor & Newton. Believe me, I've tried others, and they don't compare with quality, color, vibrance, permanence. Okay, so we're going to load up the brush with quite a bit of pigment because we've already wet the paper, and we're going to just go back and forth all the way down and get a nice wash going. And the sky is always darker straight up and gets lighter at the horizon. Since our horizon is going to be about right here, we're going to go light and then get darker as we go down into the lake. Now you're welcome to sketch some mountains and trees in there if you feel more comfortable doing that. I've just like to kind of wing it and see how it comes out, just for the fun of it. Now down here, because it's the lake, I'm going to add a little bit of Winsor green, this color. See how it kind of turquoises it up a little bit? Makes it look more like a Tahoe water. There we go. See how pretty that is? Okay, then we're going to let that dry. I'm going to use the blow dryer. Okay, so now our horizon is right here. It's good to measure it so that it's nice and straight. Otherwise, it can be crooked and then you'd have a nice crazy horizon line in there. Let's just do this. You can do it with a pencil. I'm just doing it with a brush. Probably best to measure up from the bottom to get it exact, but I don't want to bore you with that. Okay, so we're going to start, like with all landscapes, you go from the farthest, the horizon, forward. So we're going to put in some mountains. Now let's use the same colors we have, the cerulean blue, and let's add a little, oopsie doodle, a little burnt sienna. See how that makes kind of a pretty green color? So cerulean blue, burnt sienna, and we're going to draw the line across. Now you don't, this isn't like a coloring book. You're not going to just color in between the lines. While the paint is wet, you want to drop in other colors. So I'm just going to mix up my paint as I go. And because the paper is kind of wet, a little bit damp, gives you a little bit of time to work it. And see how I'm mixing the color as I go? That's why it's not always the same color. That's boring. There you go. Now while it's wet, you can drop in some other colors. Let's drop in a little more cerulean blue. There. And let that dry. And in the meantime, we're going to put some texture in the water. So we're going to use this, I'm using a round brush now. And let's take the cerulean blue and just very loosely just do some lines. Wet it a little bit. Do some lines. Just to give some motion in the water. So it's darker up close and lighter the farther you get away. You could add a little green, a little more green in there to get it more beautiful dark up in the front. Because the water is really deep right here where we're looking at it. So while it's wet, you can still mix in some colors. But once it starts to dry, you want to leave it alone. And the way you can tell that is if you look at the sunlight on it and it's still shiny, then you can still work it. See if it still kind of has a shine to it, like right over here, you can still work into it. But this is already drying over here. Okay, we're going to dry that. So far we've only used 3 colors. Cerulean blue, Windsor or phthalo green, and burnt sienna. These 3 colors. Okay, dry enough. So now we're going to add a tree in there. And remember, trees aren't perfect, so yours, if it doesn't look like mine, that's okay. Just have fun. The best way to learn is to just keep practicing and practicing. So now because the tree is up close, it's going to be really dark. So we want some intense color. So we're going to start with the phthalo green. It's a real emerald artificial green. You rarely use it. In fact, I never use it by itself. This is my dirty water. This is my clean water. I'm going to add more of the burnt sienna to it, because that gives me a nice forest green. So it's still the same colors. And we're going to start with a starting point, let's say up here. And then we want to kind of mark our way down so we get the trunk straight. So that's our point of reference. Now they start off really small at the top, so you're just going to plunk in some color. And then skip down a little bit. This brush is great because it has such a fine point. Remember, they get tinier and thinner as they get out and thicker as they're closer to the tree trunk. I'll add a little more burnt sienna. So you see how I can go right over those mountains because it's a darker color. So again, and they kind of reach up to the sky. More green, more burnt sienna, a little more water. You just don't want, now see I'm getting them evenly spaced, so I'm going to break that up a little bit. You want it to be a little more interesting. So I'm just working my way down. More water, more phthalo green. More burnt sienna. I'm dirtying up my burnt sienna, but I can clean that up later. And as we're coming down, you notice how the tree is getting bigger? Because the closer it gets to the ground, the thicker it is. Now this tells me I want to leave some space to show a tree trunk there, so I'm just going to do this out here. Just work your way down, 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 down. And then you can always go back and fill it in if you need to. So these I'm going to really push the paintbrush down to fill in the foliage. Pretty much I'm going to close up the painting on the bottom with more of this. Okay. Now while it's still wet, we can drop in colors. So let's drop in some burnt sienna here and there. You could put in some yellow if you want. This is cadmium yellow. Let's drop in some of that just for the fun of it. See what it does. Kind of fun. Now with some clean water, we'll just kind of use that and move it around a little bit. See how the watercolor, you can just make it move? It's all experimental. It's all part of the fun. That makes it more interesting if you've got some other colors going on in there. Okay. Now we let that dry before we put the tree trunk in. Enough. Doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to use a little brush for this, for the detail, and I'm just going to use the burnt sienna. And I'm going to add a little of the French ultramarine blue. See, instead of buying black, make your own black. It's more interesting. Burnt sienna and ultramarine blue makes a pretty dark brown or black. And we're coming down the tree trunk here. It gets bigger as it gets toward the bottom, right? You could do a branch coming out if you want. Okay. Now let's put some birdies in the sky. I'm going to add a little blue to that burnt sienna, make it more black, and do a couple little V's, V shapes. Down and up, down and up. Little and big, not too much the same. There you go. Voila! A painting of Lake Tahoe. Keep practicing and have fun.